All right, kind of a bittersweet day for me. I am announcing that I am officially done iterating on the car side of the Lego projects. I do have future projects that I'm going to be involved in that I have for myself that, again, is going to push me. But this was a labor of love over the last 5 years. Probably about July of 2020. Um, I wanted to make a Lego car. I have playing with Lego since before I can remember. It was always either guns or just building Lego sets or doing whatever. And I would always get, like, let's say a Ferrari F1 car. I would build it, I would tear it apart, and basically build a Lego firearm that was powered by rubber bands that had projectiles. But back in 2020, I decided, I wanted to make a car. And so I looked on YouTube, and probably about September or October of 2020, I saw the Buiz had modified a Lego Lamborghini Sian with 8 motors. It went something like 18, 19 miles an hour, 30 kilometers an hour, or close to it. And I thought that was really cool. And I wanted to try to do something like that. And I saw that there were kind of a few issues. Wheels were falling off. I didn't know what was causing that. I wanted to see if I could fix that problem. There was a little bit of play in the steering that seemed to give it some instability. I wanted to see if I could do anything about that. And so I kind of started on this passion project. And 5 years later, I have hit basically every milestone that I wanted to. I achieved every goal that I set out to. And to kind of give you a rundown of the vehicle, I'll tell you where I started. And I basically tried mimicking Buiz, where I had 4 motors in the rear, 4 motors in the front. And one thing I noticed right off of the bat was, let's say that the 2 motors on the rear left wheel were a little bit weaker than the 2 motors on the front right. You would get some unintended or unintentional torque vectoring. And so this rear left wheel would kind of act as a brake, and the front right wheel would act like it was getting more power, which it was from the motors, and it would steer the car to the left. Now, you could switch around motors and try to balance it out to the best of your ability, measure the motors to try to get equal torque distribution. But that wasn't the solution I wanted to go with. I wanted to have something that was kind of scalable, where you could have 2 motors, or you could have to 12 motors. And so kind of through the iterative process, I ended up coming away with a all-wheel drive system that's using 3 open differentials. You have your center differential here, you have your rear differential, you have your front differential. And one of the things that a lot of people run into, that I ran into, that took me a long time to solve, was everyone runs into a friction issue. Now, most people think that the friction is the root issue, and it's actually a symptom. And what ends up happening is there's an imbalance of torque. And I've gone over this in a previous video, kind of explaining the torque balance differentials that I have in the vehicle. But basically, the 2 gears are meshed at a 90-degree angle like this. And if this is the drive gear and this is the driven gear, when this pushes down on this gear, what ends up happening is there's an opposite reaction that's forcing the drive gear up and forcing the driven gear down rather than just rotating it. Well, by adding 2 more gears, you can distribute the torque to where the torque is being evenly applied across the differential, 180 degrees across, and the only thing it wants to do is rotate. So on one side it's being pushed down, on the other side it's being pushed up, and with that you have balanced the torque, or torque balanced the differential, and you've torque balanced all 4 gears, so that vast majority of the power that is being transmitted is going to rotation rather than into friction. So that was the first major thing that I kind of fixed with the vehicle, was the torque balance differential. And so the center differential, the rear, the front, they're all torque balanced. You also know there's some 20-tooth blue gears in here. Those are reinforcement. They are reducing the amount of flex that is in the differential. As you add more power, that flex increases, and so those gears are there to reinforce it, to make sure that there is no flex side to side. Now, the torque balancing fixed the vertical flexing. The reinforcements fixed the horizontal flexing. And so between the torque balancing, the reinforcing of the center, the rear, and the front, with two buggy motors, this chassis is able to go about 15 miles an hour, about 24-ish kilometers an hour, using just two motors. And so that's kind of just the drivetrain side of things. There's also a torque split, which varies the torque between the rear axle and the front axle. This is increasing the speed from the center differential to the front differential by about 56%. However, the center differential is going to balance out the speed difference between the front and rear axle, but because this requires more speed, it's going to receive less torque. And so with this setup, you end up increasing the total speed of the vehicle by 28%, half of the 56%, but about 61% of the torque is making it to the rear, and 39% is making it to the front. And one of the big advantages with having all-wheel drive, which is why the car is all-wheel drive, is I'm able to both accelerate and brake with all four tires. When I originally started out, I really just wanted this to be rear-wheel drive to make it the best handling Lego car that I could. What I quickly found out was, from an acceleration and cornering standpoint, rear-wheel drive was incredible. It handled really well. The problem is the moment you try to start braking, all of your braking power is on the rear. But when you're braking, weight transfers to the front, and the front has a majority of the grip. And so the rear wheels were locking. I was sliding all over the place, and it was not a good experience from a driving experience. And so all-wheel drive was really the best way to kind of solve that issue. But all-wheel drive comes with its own set of issues, and the main issue with all-wheel drive is the understeer characteristic. So you're going to put in, let's say, 20 degrees of steering input, you may only get 15 degrees out. And so through the engineering of the car, I ended up having to figure out how to get as much oversteer characteristics into the vehicle as possible, one of them being the torque split. So again, we'll just say 60-40 to make things simple, but 60% of the torque's making it to the rear, 40% is making it to the front. The suspension in the rear is a little stiffer. The anti-roll bar in the rear is a little bit stiffer. The rear ride height is slightly higher by about a quarter to a third of a stud in the rear than the front. So there is a little bit of rake to the vehicle. But basically, I've tried to induce as much oversteer into this vehicle, because it is all-wheel drive, to get it to handle neutrally. Now, outside of that, you may have seen on other vehicles, or specifically the Buick's GTA Spano, which was kind of the benchmark, was they added caster to their vehicle, and caster is going to help the wheel center when you're going in a straight line. However, caster by itself actually causes some inherent problems if you don't have other geometries or other mechanics, such as kingpin inclination axis or steering axis, along with camber gain or negative camber, static negative camber, that is. And so throughout this entire thing, I'll rotate the vehicle onto its side. You'll notice that there is a caster angle. There is a proper caster angle, and if I rotate the vehicle this way, the top ball joint is right here. The bottom ball joint is right here. So there is a proper kingpin inclination or steering axis on this as well. The top and bottom ball joints are 5.5 studs apart, whereas the inside connection points are 4 studs apart. And so that basically creates a quadrilateral, and when the suspension compresses, there is more negative camber or camber gain as the suspension compresses. And that's good for going around a corner. You maintain a proper contact patch. Another thing that you'll notice is there's an anti-roll bar on the front. There's also an anti-roll bar on the rear back here. You'll see this kind of rotating. So I was able to get anti-roll bar front and rear. Another thing that I created was a Lego coilover. So this is a pneumatic cylinder. I connected the top and the bottom with a hose, filled it with water, put a spring on it. And so when the suspension compresses, water gets forced down through the bottom port, through the hose on top of the piston, and then when it decompresses, the fluid goes, or the water goes in the opposite direction. But because the holes are so small, that creates restriction, and that restriction is what's causing the damping on the vehicle. And so this has a coilover setup just like a normal car would, so it has dampers, and how far out it is on the bottom wishbone is changing the leverage, so you can change the damping stiffness of the you can change the stiffness of the damper based on where you mount it on the bottom wishbone, and same with the additional spring to support the additional mass of the vehicle. Where that is placed on the bottom wishbone is going to dictate the leverage. And if you notice down on the bottom, the front coilover and spring is one stud closer to the center of the vehicle than the rear. There's two studs here. There's a single stud here. That is to produce or induce oversteer in the vehicle, making the rear a little bit more stiff than the front. And that was one of the ways that I was able to tune the damper, the springs, and everything to the weight of the vehicle, is basically changing the leverage that it has, that this spring has over the hub of the vehicle where the wheel sits. And so you've got caster, kingpin inclination axis, camber gain. You'll notice there's Ackerman steering geometry on here. It's about 75%. It's not 100% Ackerman. It's about 75%. You've got torque split. You've got your coilovers. You've got double wishbone suspension in all four corners. The fake motor does rotate with the powertrain. So when it's stationary, it's not going to be moving. However, when the car is moving, the motor will be moving, but it is a 2-to-5 ratio, or the motor spins about 40% of what the wheels spin at. And previously it was 1-to-1, but the wheels would go about 3,000 RPM, which means the motor was at 3,000 RPM. And this was a huge source of friction in the internal drivetrain. And so I reduced it from 1-to-1 to 2-to-5, or 16-to-40. And that reduced the friction that the fake motor was causing at top speed by a substantial amount. And this model, while it only has two motors and two Buies 3.0 Pro, will go 15 miles an hour, or a little over 24 kilometers an hour. And again, that's with just two motors. And one of the huge advantages of having all of the technology and all of the geometries on this car is I can corner without having my wheels fly off. I don't need to have any kind of locking mechanism to lock the wheels in. The geometries keep the wheels pressed into the vehicle. That's another inherent advantage of the all-wheel drive system, is that all four wheels are producing power, or are transmitting power to the ground. So all of them naturally want to toe in, which is another thing. It's pushing the wheels into the center of the vehicle rather than trying to pull them off. And so all-wheel drive solved multiple issues, not just the braking issue, also the wheels falling off issue, along with the other geometries. But basically 5 years down the road, everything that I wanted on the car, I have achieved. I've got all the suspension geometries on the front. There's no scrubbing. There's no collisions anywhere. The articulation is good. There's no bump steer. The rear articulation is good. You've got dynamic cambering as well there. However, on this one, the top and bottom pivot points are only 5 studs apart versus 5.5. The inside is still 4 studs. So you get a slight bit more camber gain on the front than you do the rear under cornering, which is another bias that you want. You want a little bit more on the front than the rear. But at the end of it all, there were a few things that I kind of feel were pivotal in this. And really I guess the shining star, or the coup de grace, is really going to be the torque balance differential, and its reinforcement, and how much friction it reduced in the entire internal drivetrain. With no load, I'm only losing something like 4% to internal friction. So if you were to take the axles out of the motors and measure the motors, they're somewhere in the neighborhood of about 3,000 RPM. And when you add in all of the drivetrain and everything, I'm only losing somewhere in the neighborhood of about 125 RPM. And so instead of everything moving at 3,000 RPM, if everything was 1-to-1, I'd be moving it somewhere around 2875 RPM. So there's very little losses in the drivetrain under no load. Under load is a different story. Under load, I only get about 70% efficiency out of the entire drivetrain. Maybe a little bit more than that with the two motors, but 70% efficient. So if the motors are spinning at 3,000 RPM, the wheels are only spinning at about 2,100. So now with torque split, it changes a little bit because this is increasing the total speed of the vehicle by 28%. But long story short, I'm losing about 30% to rolling resistance, air resistance, and internal friction. Whereas with no load, no air resistance, only internal friction, I'm only losing about 4%. So the torque balance, the reinforcement of the torque balance to stop both the horizontal and the vertical flexing, really is what made this entire vehicle possible. And so at the end of it all, like I said in the beginning of this video, this is kind of my finish line. I have reached every goal I set out for myself. I got every geometry I wanted to. I got everything tuned to where I wanted it to. It handles beautifully. I get probably about 6 to 8 minutes of drive time with the car when I go outside to play around with it. It's not an amazing amount of time, and it takes about 45 minutes to charge. You get 6 to 8 minutes of playtime. It's not a great ratio, but this has been an amazing learning experience, an amazing journey. I hope that I've helped a few people along the way that have used my designs or used information that I had that stuff wasn't working. With the torque balancing, I've tried multiple iterations of torque balancing, and it's not just torque balancing. It was dynamic camber. It was anti-roll bars. There was a plethora of basically things I found out that didn't work. What you see in front of you is what did, but the 1,000 or 2,000 iterations of stuff that didn't work or didn't work optimally, a lot of that was hopefully seen and shared over the years. But I wanted to at least kind of commemorate the test chassis that I've been working on. I will be implementing everything that's on this test chassis onto the R8, and then finishing up the bodywork of the Audi R8 LMS GT2. And once that's done, the segment of kind of track car, road car will be done. I do have future plans. I do want to work on both a rock crawler and a Baja truck, or a trophy truck, to do both high speed and low speed off-road. And then hopefully that doesn't take 5 years, but once that's done, there's possibility of looking at making an F1 car that has very similar kind of characteristics, hopefully handles impeccably well. That one, I am looking at a disconnected drivetrain and having it rear wheel drive only with some sort of a clutch, and that clutch engages under braking, so I can brake with all four tires but only accelerate with the rear two, so that I get the oversteer characteristic of a rear wheel drive vehicle. So a lot of ideas floating around there, but at the end of the day, I kind of just wanted to share everything that went into the car, all of the time that was spent, problems that were solved. This is my this is the pinnacle of what I was able to achieve with Lego, and I hope somebody looks at this and they say, I can do better. And I hope that you do better. And I hope I actually learned something from you. I think that's what this community is all about. And I think that we've exemplified that really well. And I want to appreciate and say thank you to everyone along the way who has helped me. I'm pretty sure I've lost all of my sanity on this, and I've regained some. And everybody who's helped me, I don't necessarily want to name names right off the bat, but one of the biggest ones was Nick Yasno. Was a huge inspiration. I hope I said that correctly. I haven't heard anyone say his name, but watching him build the Countach and solving the different problems he solved with the Countach was really incredible. And I got a lot of information from that, and I was able to learn and understand a lot of the problems that he solved in his own way. Now, different steering geometry or different suspension setup. I think he was using a McPherson strut, whereas I'm using double wishbone on my front axle. But nonetheless, the geometries and the ideology kind of stays the same. You really want to tune the car to not only look proper, but also function properly. But at the end of it all, I just wanted to say this is kind of the culmination, the pinnacle of everything that I could create. And I wanted to say thank you to everyone who has helped me along the way and who has helped me out. I couldn't have done this alone. I know that I'm the one sitting here right now with the car, but there have been quite a few people who were pivotal in helping me solve problems. And it's just, I'm glad that I am part of the community. And I just wanted to, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. I appreciate all of y'all. Hopefully I'll be putting out more videos. Hopefully I get the R8 updated and done soon so I can show you guys kind of the R8 and sign off on the portion of the build that is track car / road car and start getting into the off-road stuff. But I appreciate all of y'all. Thank you very much. Like, comment, subscribe. You all have a great day.